disclaimer. There we go. Thank you guys for joining us today for this presentation of immigration for the founder's journey. We will be recording this webinar and the recording link will be emailed to all attendees and registrants. This webinar is provided as an educational service by Alcorn Immigration Law. The information discussed is an overview only and should not be construed as legal advice or advice to take any specific action. Please be sure to consult a knowledgeable professional with assistance for your particular case. Please submit any questions you have today using the Q&A function. The questions do get shared publicly, so please do not share sensitive or personal information. There is an option to submit your questions anonymously. We will try to get to as many questions as time permits. And it is now my pleasure to introduce you to the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law, Sophie Alcorn.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lex. Thank you, Monty, so much, and Interact for welcoming Alcorn to speak to you today. It's a pleasure to be here. So thanks so much for having us.
Oh, absolutely.
Wonderful. So I'll dive in. I have a presentation that I do. We'll record this so that other people in Interact can get all the information. And everybody, if you have questions, you're welcome to put those in the Q&A window now or at any point throughout the materials, and I'll answer them throughout. And I will also make sure we have time to answer them at the end. So today we're going to be talking about whatever startup founders need to know about U.S. immigration, both for themselves personally and a little bit about growing and scaling teams. Startups and immigration intersect in a lot of ways. At Alcorn, we are an immigration law firm. We do inbound US visas and green cards for startups and teams and families of people who work at startups. And there's sort of been a big decoupling of geography and work and how we work in teams since the pandemic started. But immigration is still really important for startups. And it reminds me of this Paul Graham essay from 2007, where he talks about the importance of startup hubs geographically, because startups are a very specialized business, as specialized as diamond cutting, and in startup hubs, they understand it. And that comes down to the availability of talent and being synchronous, having the option to be synchronous in time zone or to have on-sites with your team, or just to ensure that everybody has peace of mind to be creative. Immigration can play into giving people from different places around the world a solid geographical footing. So today's webinar is really geared toward founders who are looking at getting a visa or a green card for themselves, and who are in the process of building a startup and probably seeking funding. And so we'll talk about how immigration intersects with the fundraising process, and what you can do to maintain your own immigration status as you go through due diligence and you stay in the US to build your company. And we'll also be talking a bit about team immigration as well, which is another service that we do offer. So if you're looking at the US immigration process and you're wondering, do I qualify? What if I don't qualify? Is it hard? Is it scary? Will I make it? Can I do it? I just want to start off by saying that it really doesn't matter whether you are pre or post a variety of things. So we help college freshmen get O visas. We help people who have dropped out of college get green cards. It doesn't really matter. There are many immigration pathways that do not require a specific conventional educational degree. Oops. It also doesn't matter if you have a minimum viable product yet. The government doesn't know or care. It's not part of any visa requirement to have this. So that will not affect your immigration sponsorship for yourself or your team members. It doesn't matter whether you've raised money yet or not. We help founders and teams who are bootstrapping or getting money from friends and family. They can qualify for immigration. If you have a seed round, pre-seed, Series A, any of that, like that's great. But you don't have to have funding to sponsor somebody for immigration. It doesn't matter if you have product market fit. Government also doesn't know or care what that is. They don't know or care if your company is a unicorn. There's no requirement for valuation in the immigration process, although of course it can be helpful, but it's not necessary. Likewise, an IPO is not necessary, and you don't need a Nobel Prize. So there's a lot of stuff that people tell them, oh, I'll be successful if I achieve X, Y, Z. And those are really lofty goals for startup founders, which is wonderful, but you don't have to wait to be a really hyper successful founder with these things to get your immigration squared away. So really, what we're going to focus on today is, how to handle immigration for anybody who has hopes and dreams of living and working legally in the United States for a startup. So if you want to not only live, but be free in the United States, your journey begins now. So that is true whether you're outside of the country or inside of the country, whether you've ever had a visa or not. We can help people in all those situations. So just a little bit about me. I write for TechCrunch. I have a weekly column. I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law. I think we're the leading immigration law firm for tech startups in the United States. My dad was an immigration lawyer. My mom is an immigrant from Germany. I've been doing this since I was like 12 years old, working at my dad's law firm. And I built my team of caring, compassionate service providers, attorneys, paralegals who really care about empowering our clients, because we know what an amazing impact you'll have on making the world a better place. So I just want to clarify one thing about the webinar, and you're welcome to add any questions as we now get into the meat of things. But about startup immigration, I think there's really two phases, and you could be an early stage founder in the 0 to 1 phase, as Peter Thiel named his book. You're going from an idea in your head to achieving product market fit. That is where founder immigration is really critical, and maybe immigration for early stage team members. There could be a lot of types of visas involved, including H-1B transfers for a CTO, or maybe you have an Australian chief marketing officer and they need an E3 visa. So there's a lot of visas we can do here, but really it's the founders who need to handle their own immigration primarily at this point, especially as they're raising funding. So that's where these self-sponsored immigration options that we're really going to dive into today can come most into play. Those can be things like an O1 visa for somebody who's on an F1 student to be able to build their startup while they're waiting for their green card. It could be different flavors of green card. We'll be talking about the EB1A and the EB2 NIW. And then there's this corollary when people have some money and they need to hire and they need to do immigration sponsorship for growing teams. And this is more in the realm of corporate immigration, and it's also a service we provide. It goes along with raising capital and blitz scaling. And when you're in this phase and you're looking at recruiting and retaining talented engineers and go-to-market leads and sales leaders, and as your company elevates and you need more and more sophisticated people with expertise in startups, that's where being a company that provides immigration sponsorship for your team members can really come into play. So this is also what large companies do to sponsor immigration. If any of you have background in corporate or big tech, the H-1B lottery, H-1B transfers, perms, green cards, I-140s, EB2, EB3, we do that, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. The bulk of what I'm going to be talking about today is founder immigration, but I know we have a question about hiring a student, and I'm happy to address that as well. Okay, so as we dive into this, we're going to be focusing on demystifying qualifications for founders. And we're going to be talking about 3 specific immigration pathways: the O1A visa, the EB1A green card, and the EB2 NIW green card. And as you compare your options, as you're looking at this as a founder, there's some important things to note. So number 1, what is it? Well, the O1 is a visa. It's a non-immigrant working visa. It's temporary. It's for up to 3 years, and you can extend it beyond that. But if you don't extend it, it'll expire and you have to leave the country. The green card, it's called employment-based. So EB1, EB2, these are the preference categories that the government gives to assign how many they're going to allocate, how many green cards they're going to allocate each year for permanent residents, and how many people get to have their turn at the front of the line to get their green card each year. All of these, can a qualified applicant be prepared to file any of these in less than 3 months? And the answer for all of them is yes. If somebody's qualified, it can be, 4 to 6 to 12 weeks, depending on what speed you want to do it at, how many of your documents are available, how quick it is to get your letters of recommendation signed. But all of these can generally be prepared and sent to the government within 3 months. Will the government how long will it take for the government to make a decision? Well, a lot of this stuff is like 9 to 12 months. But if you pay extra for premium processing, which is $2,500, then the government can make a decision in less than 2 weeks. So that's already available for O1 petitions and EB1 green cards, but it will be added in the future for the EB2 and NIW green card category. I will also say, though, if you compare the bottom line, the total time to get it, an O1 at a foreign consulate where you're getting a stamp in your passport from multiple entry visa to come in and out, could probably do all that from start to finish in 6 months. But if you're seeking a green card, it's probably minimum a 2-year process, even though that one portion, the petition, you can get a decision in 2 weeks. But for most people from most countries, it's going to be at least 2 to 3 years. For people born in India or China, it could be longer, especially in the EB2 category. So before we dive into that, another question I often get from founders is, can I self-petition? So the green cards clearly allow self-petitions. The cool thing about an O1, it does technically need a petitioner. However, the person who signs your forms as the petitioner could actually be an agent. It doesn't have to be a company that you're working for. And if you set it up with an agent, you can have an itinerary of jobs. So on the next line, that allows you to work at a variety of jobs. So with all of these, you can set yourself up to have multiple income streams and multiple types of permissible work. So with that, let's examine 3 journeys. Another thing I will add actually is people want to know if they're married about their spouses. So if you get a green card with any of these, your spouse and your kids under 21 can be included with you. The spouse of an O1 holder who is a dependent visa holder in an O3 category, they cannot get a work permit in the United States. So often people whose family is in that situation where the spouse needs to work, either the spouse gets their own work visa independently, or they just file for green cards for the whole family as soon as possible, and then they wait for their work permit to come in the mail, usually 6 months after filing. Okay, so let's examine 3 journeys. These are kind of the most common startup founder journeys that we tend to see at Alcorn, and probably some of this will resonate with you all. There are a variety of international students in the United States or recent graduates who want to become startup founders. There are also engineers currently employed in big software companies in the United States already, most commonly on H-1B visas. And there are global founders around the world who maybe aren't even in the United States yet and who are looking to come here and start working on their startups. So as with any journey, one does not simply walk into more doors. So if you're going to come to the United States, you have to be careful to make the right preparations and ensure that everything is in compliance. So to start off with people who have been F1 visa holders or even J1 visa holders, first of all, just a word of encouragement, 25% of unicorns were founded by at least one international student. And I think there's another statistic even that over 50% of unicorns have at least one immigrant founder. So you are in very good company. So for international students, if you know that you're at the very beginning of your journey, we do have an online class that you can avail yourself of, and we'll share a promo code for that, but it's called Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp, and it walks you through all the basics if you don't have any accomplishments yet for O1A, EB1A, or EB2 NAW, so that you can get qualified. But in general, first, students have a question about timing and when they can work. So at the beginning of when you're a student, you're not able to work in the United States. Starting with your first summer as an F1 student, you can get curricular practical training. In your second year, you can either do CPT or pre-completion OPT. My TechCrunch Plus article that got published today is about international students and CPT and pre-completion OPT. That'll be posted on our website in a week without the paywall in case you want that content. Also, post-graduation, international students can apply for up to 12 months for regular OPT. So that's a work permit. And that's what most people who recently got a bachelor's, master's, or PhD in the United States do. And if they studied in a STEM field, then they could be eligible for another 24 months of work authorization called STEM OPT. So I'll answer the question we got in the chat window here about hiring someone who is currently on a student visa for a part-time or internship role. I think the first question would be to identify with that candidate where they are in this timeline. Are they pre or post graduation? If they are pre-graduation, then they're either going to need to apply for CPT or pre-completion OPT. I usually recommend CPT. If you use too much pre-completion OPT, you can lose out on your post-graduation OPT. And whether the student can qualify for pre-completion OPT or CPT depends on their degree, their school, their international student advisor. Your company will have to fill out details and documentation about the internship, and they'll have to get it approved through the government's web portal called CVIS to make sure that they're allowed to work for you. But it could be possible. And if the individual is on regular OPT, it's very easy for you to hire them. And if they're on STEM OPT and they already have it or they need to get it, you will need to have your company enrolled in the E-Verify document system from the government to check their employment documents at the time of hiring. You'll have to do that for all employees. And also you'll have to create a training plan that goes into their immigration record. And that is something we can help you with as well. So I'll talk more about H-1Bs and what these students are looking for on another slide, but at least that's the first part of the answer to your question. So if you're a founder and you've been an international student, or really, an international founder as well, the H-1B lottery is getting more and more applicants every year. So it's really nice to have a non-lottery based visa, such as the O1. And so if somebody is relatively young in their career and they don't have a lot of professional accomplishments, that's where we have the Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp class. But it's totally possible for people, even at the bachelor's level, to become qualified for an O1 by working by doing legal work in relation to their startups and their field of expertise. So some of the considerations that international student founders need to take into consideration. It's very easy to found a company on regular OPT. It gets a little more complicated on STEM OPT. Your equity matters. You might need an external advisor or internal advisor. There's different ways to set it up. It can be done. It can be a little tricky to put a founder into the H-1B lottery. There are ways to get H-1Bs for people whose time is running out. It's more expensive, and it might just be more freeing to you to have an O1 than to try to get an H-1B without the lottery, which is called a cap exempt H-1B. But there are many options for recent graduates and international students. So as we dive into what the O1A looks like, I do want to point out that it just got easier. The Biden-Harris administration created a new set of STEM amendments to the qualifications and the regulations earlier this year, because they want to help more people who are creating companies in technology and innovating to be able to stay legally in the United States. So there are 8 categories, and you only need 3 of them. And usually we feel pretty confident filing an O1 petition for somebody with at least 3 of the 8. 4 is quite helpful as well. So they are awards, membership in associations that are hard to get into, having media coverage about yourself individually, your accomplishments at this company or your accomplishments at a prior company, whether you've been the judge of any competitions, if you've created something that's novel, if you're an author who's been published, if you're a leader in a startup, and if you have a high compensation, either in a prior job based on your geographic location and your job level, and did you get high levels of bonuses compared to your peers who are similarly situated, or what's the valuation of your company, and based on your equity percentage, what can we impute to be your net worth as a result of what you've created. So we only need 4 of these. And typically startup founders tend to go for awards. We can use venture capital, we can use pitch competitions, we can use government grants from the United States or outside the United States. It's possible that your membership at Interact might count for some of this. Membership in associations, that's hard to get into. That's another one. Something like this, or Founders Network, or an accelerator or incubator program. We see Y Combinator, not startup school, but the batch programs, 500 startups, Techstars, all of that can be great. Media coverage, you could have like 8 articles from various like European newspapers, or you could have like 1 TechCrunch and 1 Business Insider article, and that's probably more than enough. For judging competitions, you could judge pitch competitions, hackathons. It's important that you get invited, that you show up and do it, and that you have proof, like a thank you note or a photograph, that you actually judged the competition. For what you created matters, that did just get easier. Specifically, they now care about patent pending. You don't just have to have an approved patent, so that got a little bit easier. For authorship, you can join Forbes Council, for example, as an expert. You have to pay, but they'll let you publish several articles a year, so that can work. Also, you could, one example that I like to share is somebody who was a product manager at Facebook was from China, and she really wanted an EB1A. And she put together all these requirements in like 6 weeks, from not qualified to overqualified. And she wrote 10 articles, and she got a column. She like talked to everybody she knew, and she got a column in a Chinese product management journal. And she published those 10 articles that she wrote, and we showed the circulation numbers, and her EB1A was approved. And then later I asked her, what did you think about this process? And she said, actually, I ended up getting a book deal, and I have a bestseller in China on product management because of that column. So a lot of this can be used as a marketing plan for your startup to attract users as well. Okay. So, all right. So now we're going to talk about people who are working at companies and who are trying to figure out if they can leave the company and start their startup, and what they do with their visa and what they do with their green card after they make this transition. So this can matter, especially for people born in India or China, because if you have a master's degree or a PhD, the latest numbers, now granted, these are like 2 to 3 years old, there's no more recent data, but it can take over 100 years to wait for your turn in line for a green card. It's really screwy. So that's why a lot of people from those countries want to be in the EB1A category. Because yeah, it's a ball and chain. So one of the things that people need to think about is an H-1B transfer, which can sometimes come up for founders. So we're happy to talk to any of you who are in that situation, or H-1B transfers can come up a lot for startups if you're hiring a team and you need to make sure that the people you want to hire can start working for you, and they're already in the US and they're working for another company and they already got selected in the H-1B lottery. And so now they need to do an H-1B transfer. So we're happy to talk to you more about that one-on-one. But then the green card can also come up for H-1B founders. And I think this is the perfect segue into the question we got, which is about somebody who's on STEM OPT with 22 months left. They have a consular H-1B, which they have not activated, and they are starting the perm green card process with their company. Is a green card ever a path to entrepreneurial freedom? As I think you don't have to be employed once you have a green card. So there's a lot of things to consider in this situation. And this is, this is precisely this slide. So if you're being sponsored by a company, you will get a priority date, which is the date your perm begins, but it doesn't get locked in as a priority date until your I-140 is approved. So that's probably a 1 to 2 year timeline for somebody who is just starting their perm right now. For people who are more advanced in their careers, they've been waiting for a long time, their priority date is current. If you're at the final stage of a corporate green card process, the I-485, if that paperwork has been pending with the government for at least 6 months, you're allowed to transfer to your startup if we can prove that it's a same or similar occupation, and you can port your whole green card process to the new company without filing a bunch of new paperwork. But in general, in order to make the green card go fast, people from India and China need to look at the EB1A, and everybody else can look at the EB2NIW, and we'll talk about that soon. Or if you're from India and China and your priority date is already current, you could look at an EB2NIW as well. So, so for the person who answered this question, it really depends on when you want to start working at a startup. If you create a company or somebody offers you a job at a startup, you could actually do a change of status in the United States from F1 to H-1B using that old approval that you never activated without leaving the country to start working at the new startup. It's probably better if you own less than 50% of the equity and you're in a technical role like CTO instead of something like CEO, because that will increase your chances of approval on an H-1B. The green card is definitely a path to entrepreneurial freedom. Once you have a green card, you are supposed to work at the company that sponsored you for several years, because the point of a green card is they're petitioning you for a good faith offer of permanent employment. So I usually recommend that people stick around at the company that sponsored them for at least a year, ideally 2 years after the green card is approved. So that can come up later on the citizenship application when they want to know your employment history, for example. So if you really have a burning desire to be a startup founder, if you're not born in India or China or subject to those backlogs, and you want to do the whole green card through your current company and you're just starting with perm, you might be able to create a startup in like 4 to 5 years. Alternatively, you could do it sooner. You could transfer your H-1B there, and you could do one of these self-petition green card options that I'm going to be talking about shortly. So it really depends on your timing. But yeah, if you have a green card, you've worked at the sponsoring employer for a couple of years, after that, you're paying your taxes, you're not going on welfare, you can pretty much do whatever you want in the United States at that point. And yeah, I'll be happy to talk about Canadian and Mexican TN options at the end. So as we're examining different green card pathways for people born in India or China, the EB-1A is like the O-1A, but it's basically just ratcheted up to a little bit of a higher standard for those categories of evidence that we talked about already. So if you don't have to go into the EB-1A line, it's much easier and faster to get a green card through the EB-2 NIW. So the EB-2 is a category for people with an advanced degree, like a master's degree or higher, or exceptional ability. And exceptional ability is a much lower standard than outstanding ability for an O1. So like if you have a bachelor's degree in an engineering field and you're part of some general professional associations and maybe you've given some conference talks, like that's probably sufficient for that prong. It has a completely different standards though, because they don't care about past extraordinary ability. For the EB-2 national interest waiver, they want to know, how are you going to help America in the future by creating jobs or saving lives? So they want to know, does your company or your project idea have substantial merit and national importance? You have to have a plan for what you're going to do once you get the green card. We also have to show a little bit about your background, that you particularly are well positioned to advance your endeavor. And we have to show that on the whole, it's better for the US to let you in than go through the normal perm process, which is generally required for most EB-2 green cards. So if you can go to, if you can be, call it chargeability, if you can go into a bucket besides the India or China green card bucket, this can take like as little as 2 years for somebody. People born in India or China, unless you have a priority date that's current, you should probably end up going in the EB-1A. So to the prior question, the person who's about to start perm at their current company, I would ask you, were you born in India or China? If yes, figure out if you can get qualified for an EB-1A faster, or have another startup that you actually want to work for sponsor you. Or are you married to somebody not born in India or China? Because maybe then you have other options. But in general, this is a good option for many people. So then also, if you're outside of the US and you're in another country, that is totally fine. It is possible to get a visa and come into the United States. If you need a visa and to go through that process, the adjudication timelines are pretty varied and all over the place since COVID. So in Berlin or Singapore, you might be able to get a work visa interview in 1 to 3 weeks from the time of filing. In Lagos or Mumbai, it's more like 3 years. So it's really important to double check this before you decide to leave the country if you're already here, and make sure that you have a solid plan in place for how you're going to get a visa. In general, we're still advising if you're in the US and you need a visa, it's probably safer to not leave, but you can chance it. If you're outside the US, sure, it's worth getting in line to start the process to get a visa to come in. So if you're outside of the country, what's the fastest way to come into the US and begin your startup? It's probably at this point an O1A if you're a startup founder. And the other benefit of having an O1A, and I kind of alluded to this, is you can have multiple gigs. Typically, like an H-1B only allows you to be employed for one company at a time. So this is really nice, especially if you're from India and China, and on your O1A, you need to continue to achieve additional accomplishments to get qualified for an EB-1A green card, but they aren't all necessarily through your own startup. We want to be able to show that all of those accomplishments were from legal work. So it can be very helpful to have this agent petitioned O1A in place with an itinerary of services, so that in addition to being a founder at your startup, your friends probably want you to be an advisor and they can legally grant you advisory shares and you can advise them. Maybe an organization wants to pay you to come be a speaker, or somebody wants you to be a consultant and they're going to 1099 you and give you contract work. So there's a lot of times when founders might want to be able to receive compensation from additional work gigs and have different revenue streams. So having an O1A will allow you to do that. Also, if you're outside of the US and your timeline is more like, hey, I want to come to the US in 2 to 3 years, you don't need a visa to come here first. You could just sponsor yourself for a green card from your home country before you come in. So that's an option as well. So if you're a founder and you're wondering, do I already qualify? Do I need more? We can provide you with guidance. We have a program called Legal Launch, and that's to help people who want an O1A, EB1A, or EB2 NIW green card figure out if you're already ready to file with the government in the next 3 months, or if you need to rack up some additional accomplishments to figure, to make sure that you have a really high chance of approval. So this is our white glove offering for founders. It gives you clarity on whether you qualify. You'll get to work with our team and have all of your immigration questions answered about travel and anything else, timing. It provides preparation for those who might not yet be ready. We'll tell you exactly, oh, hey, we think you need to judge 2 hackathons and write 3 articles. And we can be very, very specific to help you flesh out what else you need to do to qualify. And we really do find that this increases your odds of approval. And so how it works is, we project manage you through this process. First, after we accept your case and you sign up with Alcorn, we'll set a schedule for a cadence of regular weekly Zoom meetings with our team. And we'll give you a detailed checklist of everything that you need to upload. We'll review it. We have like an internal 3-level review that we do. And then it'll culminate with a personalized consultation with our attorney to determine if you should move forward at this time or if you need to do anything else to get qualified. And we have a link in the chat window for you to sign up for that. So if you're ready for an adventure, you can say, I'll pack up my bags. And we would love to support you. And we have a lot of services we can offer. Additionally, if you're hiring for your funded startup or your bootstrapping, but you're bringing on team members, we can help with any team member and their families' immigration as well. And I do see one additional question in the Q&A panel. And if anybody has any other questions, you're welcome to add them now. But there's a question about potential options for citizens of Canada and Mexico through the TN visa. So that's a great question. The TN does not work for startup founders. It's very hyper clear that you cannot be self-employed on a TN to be employed to work at a US company. There is an option for management consultant, but I don't think that would work for a startup founder. So if you're a founder from Canada or Mexico, you're best off looking at the O1, or because of those countries of citizenship, you could also look at an E2 investor visa, but those are very slow with the pandemic. Or if you already have an entity in your home country that's been doing business, you could maybe look at an L1 visa. But if you're looking at hiring people who are citizens of Canada and Mexico to a US company, yeah, the TN is great. There's about 30 professions on the list. There's various ones that apply to software engineers. There's categories that can relate to other types of engineering and to the sciences and other types of professions. There is no lottery for any TN. You can get it any time of year. Mexican citizens have to get a visa interview and fingerprinted. Canadian citizens can just apply by bringing their completed application process to the airport or the border. We can help you with that TN process if your company wants to sponsor anybody. But it's very quick. People can come in as little as like 4 to 6 weeks on a TN, maybe faster even if from Canada, maybe a little longer if from Mexico, just depending on the visa wait times. They're good for 3 years. They're indefinitely renewable. And then people who are in that position usually want to be sponsored in the H-1B lottery. as a bridge to getting a green card in the future. So that's another conversation worth having with them. So, all right, I think that is the conclusion of this webinar today, unless there are any more questions. Or Monty, you have anything you'd like us to cover?
That's it from my end as well. I think we covered most of it.
Alright.
Thank you, Sophie.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Lovely to be with you. And thank you so much for having us here today.
Absolutely. And for everyone else listening, you can find this recording on the Interact Immigration portal, as well as any of the links posted below by Alcorn Immigration. We'll be putting it in the portal as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Monty. Thank you, Sophie.
Okay, bye.
Sophie, thanks everyone.